Hello again. I've got a really interesting email that I have pasted into the description to go through with you on this video because it encapsulates much of what I've said across the two channels, and in particular the channel that covers the corruption around family courts and our case, and it also sweeps up the coordinated coercion, which I've discussed as well extensively across the two channels and have written several communications on. So on Thursday, I received an email from the now somewhat infamous Adam Lloyd, who fronted up the police state terror that my wife and I suffered in November 2025. If you read it, it's quite short. It says, in relation to the bail responder date on the 10th of February, so Tuesday of this week, you're no longer required to attend and the bail conditions have been cancelled. Now, you may have known that I'd already told them that I had no intention of adhering to those conditions. And the reason being, not a wanton act of defiance. I wouldn't do that. But early investigations that we'd made, and through my experience of dealing with him and his colleagues, we'd already deduced that they'd used this false pretext of vandalism to conduct a search of my property for over 2 hours, terrorising my wife in the process, humiliating her, searching for spray paint that I'd vandalised Rachel Hudson's car. They knew upon entering the property that that wasn't true, and I'll explain to you why that is. Because let's look at the bail conditions. So not to contact Rachel Hudson by any means, directly, indirectly, through a third party. That's a very, very funny one. Any correspondence to the Newcastle Judiciary Service, which I think they mean is the family court, just been poorly written, must be done through your own legal representative. It's a form of censorship because people are entitled to conduct their own inquiries. They're trying to. It was a slip of the hand censorship. Do not attend any location where you know a member of the Newcastle Judiciary Service to be. If encountered, the onus is on you to leave. So what they're essentially is, I don't know what their movements are. And if I were to encounter them at any location, that they may twist and say that I knew there would be the onus on me to leave. So you could almost encounter them unwittingly and breach those conditions. They were always a nonsense. But let's go back to what it's saying. Yeah. It tried to portray me as a risk to Rachel Hudson, the physical risk and damaging property. And that's been lifted. So what's changed? Nothing's changed at all, is it? Because, I'm going through this process. And anyway, it's more than just about her. We're looking at a deeply corrupt system here. So it shows you that the whole thing was a front. And I have drafted a response to this, which I'll post another video going through. But remember, in my interview, I was asked a question by one of his colleagues, Lloyd's colleagues. He invited me, tried to press me. Think about that. Tried to press me to confess to this act of vandalism because I reacted poorly to an email my wife had received from the family court system. And the email she sent was questioning why Rachel Hudson had accepted falsified, unsigned statement. And they said case closed, all that, trying to cover the corruption, of course. That I reacted poorly for that, and then somehow jumped into a time machine and went back 2 and 3 months respectively and committed these acts of vandalism. So it's clear. I mean, we don't believe these were ever investigated at the time. So the other question is, even if they were investigated at the time, why did it take them 9-10 months to come and terrorize me about it? The whole thing was a sham, which is exactly what I mentioned across the two channels, and what Adam Lloyd has done here is admitted it. But this pretext has given them some authority to seize, in my mind, steal our devices and search for research, because they're desperate to see what we have generated on the FCA, South Tyneside Council, the family court system, Rachel Hudson, the wider ecosystem, and the FCA bit. The coordinate conversion is the wealth tech occasion where we informed the FCA that we were conducting an investigation into the corrosive conflict of interest between a regulator acting as a regulator and a prosecutor, and how this leads to very, very poor outcomes for the victims of financial scandal by effectively elevating the reputation of the regulator above the welfare of the victims of financial scandals. And also, of course, this dreadful trade in children with private equity is leading to these dreadful outcomes in the care and family court system, where children are being manufactured into long-term cash generative assets to be traded with private equity. And I would ask you then to go and look at the email I posted, we received from Deirdre Ryan, which essentially is the embodiment of this business model that I have identified. Now, of course, what I've said is our extensive research, not just into South Tyneside Council, but across the country. One thing I would say before going further on this: not all judges are bad, and not all social workers are bad. Not all local authorities are bad, but we do have this encounter this system where very sort of devious and cowardly legal professionals use social workers to put their name on documents that are without doubt illegal. Now, you can see from Ryan's document here, it's a blatant breach of freedom of expression under ECHR. It also, it shows you the underbelly of the system, where children are terrorized, psychologically abused, emotionally sterilized to fit this cash generative model. It also shows the sheer depravity of the model, where in this case, she was instructed and went along with it. So I always said to her, look, if you're I know the whistleblowing situation is very, very difficult, but if you're in a position where people are making you do things you don't want to do, go and speak to your professional body. And this is something that you'll see across the country, and I think the rape gang situation will bring it out as well. So you can see what she's done here is subject a child to the heartbreak of not being able to receive presents from the parents on her birthday, merely because her mother wrote a letter at Christmas to her, reminding her that she's a Polish citizen, reminding her of the importance of her heritage, which they've destroyed in an act of cultural genocide, the path of which was laid open by Rachel Hudson, who accepted unsigned, falsified information and failed to take heed of the risks that we identified to our daughter's Polish heritage. So my wife had reminded daughter of the importance of her heritage, and as a Polish citizen, she has rights to contact the Polish consulate if she is concerned. That's the depravity of this model. Defiance of this model, the arrogance of this model, responded by denying a child rights to her parents, handing her birthday presents. Sheer disgrace. Remember also that the Polish consulate wrote a very friendly email actually, to South Tyneside Council. I believe it was an email, but we've seen the document, whether it was email or letter form. Friendly inquiry about the upholding the Polish heritage of our younger daughter, with some very, very constructive examples and suggestions of how that might be. and that has been completely ignored. So an English local authority feeling arrogant enough to ignore the Polish consulate in Manchester. That shows you the sheer poison of this model. There's already enough out there for South Tyneside Council and Rachel Hudson to be placed under investigation. But of course, what we have here, Lloyd continues with his email and says, continue to be under investigation for the crime of harassment. What he's doing here is it's a euphemism, effectively. Yeah, they use the term harassment. It's a euphemism for accountability and uncovering severe corruption. So he's using it as a subterfuge, which is quite common these days. But the problem we have here, of course, is by going through what I've gone through, it shows you that the coordinated coercion that I've been talking about for many weeks and months, many months actually, does also contain Northumbria police who have been used as an instrument of state terror to suppress the research that we have conducted and continue to conduct across the full line of coordinated coercion. Now, is it a surprise? The police, I'm afraid, have lost their, to a large extent, the trust and consent of the public, which is a great, great shame, because they've gone from being seen as protectors to oppressors now. And, this is what I've suffered really is very, very similar to the ordeal that my wife and I have suffered. Is similar to the ordeal that George Galloway suffered when he was seeking to pass through Gatwick Airport. Slightly worse for him because he was interviewed under terror legislation, which is of course highly oppressive, and they were armed in this instance. But remember, anyone can be called a terrorist these days. Now, in terms of myself, I've always denounced violence against property and people and property. I've made my feelings on Gaza known. I do believe there's a genocide there and it's continuing. But I also explained that I believe Palestine Action had undermined their own course by engaging in vandalism. That's my own opinion on that. And they always knew that. So they knew even before entering my property that I hadn't done these things, and they used it as a subterfuge to take devices. And we've seen with the police, and I think you'll see it also with rape gang inquiries that are unfolding, that the police were complicit in that as well. And they've the damage that's been done in terms of how they're seen and the lack of trust now from the public is almost irreparable. But look at where we are with society. As I've explained, we're in a situation where we're, as a country, being eaten from the inside out by corruption. And the Epstein files have really shown that. And look, also at Keir Starmer, could you find a more blatant act of cowardice in terms of trying to divert all the blame onto his advisor, Morgan McSweeney, when he takes a final decision? Notice how he's tried to switch the narrative to say that he's a victim when he was standing up wherever he was, almost lecturing us. He should be lectured, not lecturing us. How he was lied to and by Mandelson and misled and so on and so forth. We all know there was more than enough already known. I'd already questioned it on previous videos, that the difference between the treatment of Jess Staley and Peter Mandelson. There was already enough known on Mandelson to know that he was an extremely high risk appointment. Basic searches would do that, and Starmer's conduct is indicative of the cowardice that he exhibits on a daily basis. Now, in terms of this narrative nonsense, and using narrative to invent into reality, I've got an interesting quote for you here. It's actually from Galbraith's The Great Crash of 1929. It's probably a good time to be reading this sort of literature, given the vast overinvestment that we're seeing, or exuberant investment we're seeing in AI. He uses the term man It could apply to any persons. I'm just reading the text, but I don't mean it in a misogynist way. Wisdom itself is often an abstraction associated not with fact or reality, but with the man who asserts it and the manner of its assertion. So what it essentially means is we live in a world that's not based on facts. It's based on narrative and the assertion of narrative, the repeating of narrative to try and invite us to believe what people want us to believe. Right, that's it for now. I will post another video very shortly detailing my response to this extremely useful email that I received from Adam Lloyd. Take care. Bye.